Welcome to another session of Life Skills with Mrs. T. I'm Mrs. T, and in this session I'm going to be going through how you sew a button on. This is quite a useful thing to know, especially if you happen to have a button falling off a shirt or trousers. It means instead of having to go out and buy something new, you can just fix it and carry on wearing. So next step is to gather all your equipment together. So you'll need a needle, and just a bog standard needle will work, and I have double threaded it. So if you can see, I've brought two threads, so I've double threaded it, two threads together, and then I've just knotted it at the end. Then I've got beeswax, and you pull the thread over the beeswax, so like so, and that just coats it in a thin layer of beeswax, which will hopefully prevent knotting. A matchstick, a button, and in this case hopefully it's the button that came with the piece of clothing, some appropriate thread and some snips, and obviously your piece of clothing. So this is my husband's shorts. He's popped a button at the waistband. I must stop feeding him so many cakes, poor boy. So if you can see, there's a dent here, and often you'll find some thread where the button was, so just make sure there's no thread there, and if there is, just take it out. So what I want to do is start from the underside, so the underside of the waistband, and I'm going to start here, so where the dent is, because I know already that that will match up with my buttonhole. So I'm going to pull my thread through, and it should be secure because obviously I've knotted it. Next I take my button, I'm just going to unzip this bit so you can see what I'm up to. I'm going to take my button, so I've got 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to thread through one of the holes and just rest it on the fabric here. I'm going to take my matchstick, I'm going to place it in the middle of the holes. The reason that I've got the matchstick here is that it helps create something called a shank, which so by having the matchstick, and I'm going to basically thread over the matchstick, it allows for some slack in the thread, so then you can create your shank. And this is really helpful when you want a button for things that have a lot of pull, so waistbands, shirts, anything that's got a bit of pull and you need a bit of give in it, then it's really good to create a shank. So I'm just putting my matchstick, so it is a little bit fiddly and it does take a little bit of figuring out where your fingers go, but I'm just, like I say, putting my matchstick in the middle, and I'm going to do a crisscross. I'm going to go over, and this is where it gets a bit fiddly, because the aim is that you try and put your needle back into that little dent, as you can see. So that's where my threads come out, and I'm just going to pull it back through, and at the same time trying to hold my matchstick in place and make sure the thread, which I'm failing abysmally at right now. So yeah, so that's one. So if you can see, I've done that, and then what I want to do is come back in, but into the same position. So look at where you've been. You might find that you end up in another hole, so just keep playing. So I'm going to go back the way I came, pull through, and then go back over to the other hole. Again, trying to keep within that sort of area that I was in. Now I want to go to the opposite button, so one that's not got any thread in. So I'm going to go into one of the other holes, again, come through, and as you obviously do more threads, the matchstick will stay in place a little bit more. So I'm just pulling through, and then I'm going to do a crisscross, so I'm creating a cross over to the separate hole there. I'm just going to do that, pull through, and then as you can see there, I've got a bit of a crisscross going on. So I'm just going to do that a few more times just to create some strength. So do your crisscross. So probably 3 or 4 times on each side. Again, trying to keep within the same area that you've been. So that this will be helpful towards the end when you secure the button. So I'm just going to keep going until I have a strong enough crisscross that I'm happy that that's secure, and I can take my matchstick out. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to take my matchstick out, and as you can see there, I've got a bit of slack. So this is where we create our shank. So I'm going to bring the needle back through, but instead of going through any of the holes, I'm going to come out the middle and pull through. I'm then going to wind my thread a few times just around the button. So I'm winding it between the button and the fabric. So I'm just winding it around. And if you can see there, that's created a shank, so that's quite secure now. So what I want to do is then bring the needle from top side to underside. And as you can see, I've kept it reasonably neat here, but I want to secure it in an X. So I'm gonna do a loop. So I'm basically just going under the stitches that I've already performed. So I'm gonna do a loop, pull that through, and then I'm gonna do a crisscross over, and again go under the stitches and pull it through. Might just do that one more time just to give it an extra bit of strength there. Pull it through. And then once more for good luck. And then before you finish that, you can see I've got a bit of a loop there. So I'm just going to bring the needle under the loop, pull it tight. I'm just going to do that one more time, and then I've knotted it then. So again, I've got a loop, needle through, create a knot, and then that's knotted. And I'm just going to snip that off, and then snip that off there just to tidy that up. And that's me. I've got a nice tight button there, ready to go back on the waistband. So that's how you go about putting a button onto a piece of clothing. So thank you for joining me for this session, and I look forward to spending some time with you again at Life Skills with Mrs. T.